To another Access 72 video, and in today's video I'm back with another interview, and I'm here with Danielito Zorrilla. And so if you're new around and you haven't subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you like it. And so just for everybody watching at home, he's a 29-year-old super lightweight and he's 17-2, and we've got a translator in Mo Boxing No Problem, Jose. It's an absolute pleasure to have both of you here today, and so just we'll get straight into it. And so we'll start with a question which I always like to ask: why did you start boxing?
Y Danito, para empezar con la pregunta que siempre le gusta empezar, es ¿por qué escogiste el boxeo?
El boxeo siempre me gustaba, yo lo veía desde muy niño y lo veía. Nunca pensé que iba a ser boxeador hasta que un amigo me invita al gimnasio y desde que entré pues me encantó.
Yeah, so no, he said he's always watched boxing since he was a kid. He never really thought there was going to be something for him, that he was going to be a professional boxer. But one time a friend invited him over to the gym. He got into boxing, and he really liked it.
Brilliant stuff. And so, do you kind of remember what happened in your first amateur fight?
Y Danito, ¿recuerdas cómo fueron tus primeras peleas como amateur?
Sí, yo me acuerdo muy bien. Empecé perdiendo, mis primeras dos peleas las perdí y desde ahí pues como que lo cogí más en serio. Ahí fue donde empecé a ganar muchas.
Yeah, no, he says he remembers them quite well because actually his first two fights were losses. So he started his amateur career with two losses, but that actually kind of motivated him. That was kind of the hunger to take boxing more seriously, and that led to many more wins as an amateur.
Of course. And so, what would he say was his biggest achievement from the amateurs?
Can you repeat that question, actually?
What would he say was his biggest achievement from the amateurs?
Y Danito, en tu opinión, ¿cuál fue tu mayor logro como amateur?
El mayor logro fue gané plata, pero mucho, pero así por encima gané plata en Centroamericano, Veracruz. Quedé entre los primeros 8 a nivel mundial.
Yeah, so he says, lots of achievements as an amateur. The one that kind of stands out was finishing silver for the Central American Games. In the Veracruz, you finished within the top 8.
Brilliant stuff. And so, why did you end up turning professional when you did?
Y Danielito, ¿cuál fue la razón que te fuiste como profesional en el tiempo que lo hiciste?
Ya había terminado el ciclo olímpico y yo siempre pues me preparé para algún día saltar al profesional y entendí que ese era el mejor momento.
Yeah, so he said the Olympic cycle had already passed. He was always trained to become a professional. So once the Olympic cycle was over, it was kind of the perfect timing for him to make his professional debut.
Most definitely, and of course things have gone very well on the professional side of things, of course racking up the 17 victories. And so throughout his whole career, what would you say is your biggest or best performance?
Y Danito, te ha ido muy bien como profesional. Miramos que tienes 17 peleas aquí ganadas. En tu opinión, ¿cuál tú dirías que ha sido tu mejor pelea?
Mi mejor pelea fue la última con Regis Prograis. Yo entiendo que Prograis es uno de los mejores del mundo y yo con tan solo 3 semanas de preparación pues yo sentí que le gané. Entiendo que yo mejor preparado la pelea hubiera sido más clara.
Yeah, so he says actually, his best fight, today as a pro is that fight against Regis Prograis. He understands Regis Prograis is a great fighter. Danielito, with only 3 weeks notice, gave a hell of a fight. He thought he actually won. Of course, with more preparation, he could have made that fight, clearer.
Yeah, of course. No, it was an amazing fight, and I suppose going into that fight, of course, like you mentioned, he had that 3 weeks notice, but of course he would have been the underdog either way for that fight. But credit to him to taking these tough tests. But does he not really mind being that kind of underdog scene as a fighter?
Y Danito, como menciona él, sabemos que tuviste estas 3 semanas solo de entrenamiento. Ibas a ser el lado B, el que no debería de ganar sin importar el tiempo. Ah, ¿Tú disfrutas ser, que no te estimen como que vas a ganar y venir como el lado B y sobresalir?
Sí, a mí me gusta hacer el lado B, porque ahí puedo demostrar de qué estoy hecho. Y yo tiendo a mejorar en cada pelea, que me gustan los retos, quiero ser número uno en el mundo y para hacerlo, pues debo de pelear con los mejores.
Yeah, so he says he likes actually coming in as the B side, the underdog, to really show what he's about. And when he's the B side, you're usually in tough fights. And you're fighting great opponents.
Indeed, and so for his kind of tough fights, of course, he has unfortunately suffered them 2 defeats. But I mean, I'm sure he's not really taken that last one as really much of a defeat. But in the first one, especially against Barboza Jr., he managed to then bounce back and then get back to winning ways, and I'm sure he's going to be wanting to do the same this time. But how difficult can it be to bounce back from a defeat?
Y Danito, como vemos, tu derrota no tan definido, perdiste contra Barbosa, pero saliste para adelante con más victorias y esperamos lo mismo aquí con esta pelea con Progress. ¿Qué tan difícil tú ves poder salir para adelante y seguir con más victorias?
Yo creo que ahora va a ser diferente porque ahora me puedo dedicar al boxeo gracias a esta pelea. Antes de la pelea de Barbosa, pues yo tenía que trabajar, tenía que mantener un hogar, tengo 2 hijos. Se me hacía muy difícil estar en buenas condiciones. Por eso siempre me iban a llamar yo sin estar preparado porque tenía más obligaciones. Pero ahora que puedo dedicarme, creo que será diferente y con tan solo lo que demostré esta última pelea, pues ya deben saber que el número uno está aquí en el boxeo.
And so he said this time it's going to be different, with the Barbosa defeat. He was still working another job. He couldn't really focus everything in boxing. And with this Progress fight, he's kind of set himself in a better place financially, where he can dedicate himself to the sport. So with his performance against Progress, he's shown that the number one guy's here. It's him.
Indeed, most definitely, and I know that he's kind of been around the boxing sport now for quite a while now, and like everybody, I'm sure he has those days where he probably doesn't really want to go to the gym or doesn't really want to train. And what would you say is your kind of biggest motivation at the moment?
Y Danielito, me imagino que tú estando en el boxeo vas a tener por mucho tiempo, vas a tener esos días donde no quieres levantarte de la cama para ir al gimnasio o no quieres entrenar. ¿Qué es tu motivación que te haces seguir y entrenar en este boxeo cuando te llegan esos días?
Me gusta el boxeo, quiero ser alguien en la vida, quiero echar para adelante a mí y a mi familia. Y yo entiendo que esta es una de las maneras donde yo puedo cumplir todos mis sueños siendo boxeador.
Yeah, so he says, ultimately it comes down to him liking boxing. He wants to, be somebody. He wants to come out on top. Him and his family, and boxing is this avenue that he's found can provide for him and his family. So that's kind of his motivation.
Good to hear. And so for himself, of course, he's coming off this defeat, but he's still at a very high level fighting, and so I'm sure he's not really going to be wanting to take much of a step back in opponents. And so would he kind of always from now on just be wanting the toughest of tests for fights?
Y Danilito, también nos imaginamos que con esa derrota que ya mencionaron, no es una derrota que digamos, vas a querer seguir con esos retos difíciles y solo buscar oponentes de la más alta calidad.
Si fuera por mí, yo me gustaría pelear con los más grandes en el boxeo ahora mismo, si fuera decisión mía. Lo que pasa es que con esta demostración, yo entiendo que muchos boxeadores van a reunirme, pero si es por mí, yo peleo con los más grandes, para eso estoy aquí.
Yes. So he said if it was up to him, absolutely, he wants to, fight the big names. He's ready for the big names. But he also understands that because of his last performance, there's going to be some boxers that, will avoid him, or that won't want to get in the ring with him. But absolutely, he wants to continue fighting the big names and on the toughest challenges.
Great stuff. And so for himself and his kind of style wise, what would you say kind of is your best and key attribute in your opinion?
Y Danielito, hablando de tu estilo de boxeo, en tu opinión, ¿qué es lo mejor que tú haces en el boxeo? ¿Cuál es tu arma secreta?
Mi alma secreta es que yo peleo de todas formas. Yo peleo de todas formas y mi arma secreta es mi habilidad. Puedo, de la manera que yo entrene, puedo adaptarme y pelear. Es como ahora con Prograis. Con Prograis, con el poco tiempo que yo tenía, no podía pararme a pelear con él. Y en solo 3 semanas, pues me adapté al boxeo para hacer la pelea que hice.
Yeah, so he says his biggest attribute is his flexibility and his adaptability. He can fight all styles. As you saw in this Progress fight, he knew he wasn't able to kind of stand in front of him, so he boxed intelligently. So that's his secret weapon is that he can adapt and fight as needed.
Most definitely. And so for himself, like he said, he wants to have these kind of big fights still, but where would he like to see himself in a year's time?
Y en un año, Danito, ¿dónde te ves tú en el boxeo?
Todo depende, tú sabes que esto es negocio, pero si me echan con los boxeadores que tengo que pelear, yo me veo campeón del mundo.
He says it all depends. As you guys know, this is a business, but if it's up to him in 1 year, he sees himself as champion.
Great stuff, amazing. And so I did just kind of want to get his thoughts on just kind of 1 or 2 boxing fights that are seemingly kind of in the making around this kind of division that he's in. And so he's got, of course, Bucraeus versus Haney there, the kind of talks, but also there's Haney versus Lopez. And I just kind of wanted to know his thoughts on either of them fights, if they do happen, who he thinks would come out on top.
Y Danielito, queremos preguntarte tu opinión sobre algunas peleas que están rumoradas en tu división. La primera es Devin Haney contra Regis Prograis, y la segunda es Devin Haney contra Teofimo López. ¿Qué es su opinión de esas peleas?
Yo entiendo que son buenas, son lo que necesita el boxeo, pero yo no sé todavía si Haney va a subir de peso, pero si lo estuviera haciendo, serían muy buenas peleas, serían una de las más grandes.
Yeah, so no, he says both of them are great fights. They would be stylistically very competitive. But he's not sure yet if Haney's actually going to move up 240 pounds. But if they were to happen, yeah, absolutely great fights, both of them.
Indeed so. And so I'll leave with this final question, which I always like to ask. He's got a little bit of a platform here. Is there anything that he'd kind of like to shout out?
Y para la última pregunta, Danielito, ya es solo dejándote hablar y dándote la plataforma. ¿Algún mensaje que quieres mandar a la gente que te apoya, a tus fanáticos?
Oh, seguro. Quiero darle las gracias a ustedes por la invitación. Siempre aquí a la orden. Y nada, esperen mucho de mí de ahora en adelante, porque ahora en adelante, pues gracias a Dios, pues me dedicaré al boxeo 100% para darle el máximo y seguir hacia adelante. Y al amigo que tiene que aprender a hablar español.
There you go. And Axel, he wants to thank you for inviting him on the platform. He's always happy to jump on, here to serve. And to his fan supporters, he wants to just say to continue watching him, to expect the best from him. He's now able to train and give 100% to boxing, so expect great things from him to come. And also, Axel, you gotta learn Spanish.
I got you, bro. Then you will be out of a job then, Jose, mate.
That's right.
No, okay, brilliant stuff. And so yeah, like the video if you do need like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching. Right.